Hello, everyone. This is Tom Fox back again for another episode, and I'm absolutely thrilled to have back with me Erica Salmon Byrne. Erica, first of all, welcome back.
Thank you, Tom, so much. Really appreciate you having me back on to talk about one of my favorite things.
We are going to talk about the 2024 Ethisphere Ethical Cultural Report entitled Closing the Speak Up Gap. Can I maybe first start by asking what was the genesis of this report, Erica?
Yeah, so Tom, you might recall, or some of your listeners might recall, that last year we issued a culture report that was kind of our first opportunity to take a big step back from the data we've been collecting on ethical culture and look for some trends. And one of the big things that we took away from that report was we have to do this more often. It was so much fun to mine the data and to kind of think about what insights we would have for the communities that we support. So we decided to make it an annual process. And so this year is the 24 report, which builds on our insight from the prior report, and we're going to get in the habit of doing this on an annual basis.
So you begin the report with 8 pillars of an ethical culture, and then you move into some of your insights. How would you like to take this podcast, Erica?
Tom, I think the 8 pillars are something that many of your listeners are going to be familiar with because they've heard us speak about them before. But maybe I'll just take 30 seconds at the front end here and kind of set up what those pillars are and why we think they matter. And then we can dive into some of the more interesting findings from our analysis of the report. So the 8 pillars you can think of as really being grouped into the things that an ethics and compliance team should care about. So one thing to get out right in front, this is not an engagement survey. We're talking about something that sits next to and is complementary of an existing engagement survey or kind of pulse, how are people feeling about the company type of measurement exercise. These are the things that really get to the heart of what a compliance team is going to want to know. And we think of those in 3 buckets. Do my people know what to do? So that's kind of pillars 1 and 2. Is the training working for them? Can they find the policies? That sort of thing. Will they say something when they see something? So that's kind of 3 and 5 and 6. So organizational justice, observing and reporting misconduct, things along those lines. And then who influences their behavior the most? And so that goes to perceptions of leadership, perceptions of managers, and pressure to compromise company standards. And so those 3 questions kind of round out the 8 pillars that we measure across every time we do this work with a company. And so what we did for this particular report was we took, Tom, the results that we have gathered since the beginning of 2020. So this is just the last 4 years worth of data. We really wanted it to be current data, kind of pandemic, part of the pandemic, and then afterwards perspectives. And so we're working with a data set of about 2 million employee responses, which just gives you a sense of the volume of the work that we're doing when it comes to helping companies measure culture.
Erica, what were some of the top insights that either surprised you or you wanted to highlight?
So I think the biggest one, Tom, and it actually ended up becoming the title of the report this time, is closing the speak up gap. And it didn't surprise us because we see this every single time that we help an organization measure their culture. But it was the piece we really wanted to lean in on because as we think about what the future of work is going to look like, this is a really key piece of the puzzle. And what the speak up gap is basically the delta between employees who are observing misconduct, so seeing things happen in the workplace and not reporting, not saying something. And so that is, in our data set, aggregated about 50% of the respondents who are making the decision not to say anything. And there are particular generational components to this. The youngest workers have the least faith in the system and are least likely to raise their hand. And so if they are seeing something, your newest employees, they're the ones that are least likely to speak up. And that's consistent, of course, with the analysis that we did with our first report, where we really called out that generational difference, but we continue to see that in the data.
So, in terms of anti-retaliation, I cannot recall the number of times you and I have touched on this in a podcast over how many years, but where do you see where we are now?
Retaliation, there continues to be this discrepancy between what the company or the ethics and compliance team thinks of, talks about, writes about when it comes to retaliation and what employees are scared of. And Tom, as you say, you and I have had this conversation so many times over the years, but what an employee is afraid of is so much bigger than illegal retaliation. And so as an ethics and compliance professional, you really have to care about getting to managers and helping them understand that treating somebody badly, in whatever form that looks like, when they raise a concern, has a phenomenally corrosive effect on the culture. And retaliation continues to be the primary reason people don't raise their hand, really closely tracking with nothing would happen anyway, so why should I bother? So those same two things that we've been talking about for a decade, Tom, those continue to be the things that prevent or hamper somebody from speaking up.
Erica, there was one set of statistics that I zeroed in on that I wanted to maybe take a little bit deeper dive with you. And I don't know why they spoke to me in the way they did, but it was essentially the question of where did you report?
Yep.
And 60% said their immediate manager. And that answer opened up a lot of different avenues for me to think about. Obviously, or perhaps one of the most obvious should be that people really want to go in and talk to their manager.
Yep.
And over half of the people do. But Erica, the thing that struck me is if this is what employee wants, are we in the compliance space delivering to managers the training they need to accept that information, understand how to be a listener, and then move that up within the organization? I wonder if you might speak to that a little bit.
Happily, Tom, because this is the hill I will die on. I mean, it really is. If I can do one thing in my career as an ethics and compliance professional, it is going to be to convince everyone within listening distance that the very best time they can spend as a team is going to be preparing managers to be the recipients of information that you need them to be. Because, Tom, here's the thing. If I'm a manager that is open to feedback, willing to listen, and ready to support my employees in making the right choices, I am going to perform better as a manager. And so helping people make those connective links between the tools they're giving to managers and the output that they're seeing from those teams, that's the work to me. Because absolutely, without question, look, hotlines matter, right? Email addresses for the ethics and compliance team matter. Getting your faces out in front of people so they know who you are and they trust you, all of that matters. But you have to center that around the fundamental fact that the person who decides what level bonus I get, the person who writes my performance evaluation, the person who decides my day-to-day job schedule, the person who assigns me to projects, that person matters more than everybody else involved by a factor of 6. And so if we don't prepare those people to get to handle the inevitable questions they're going to get, we have shot ourselves in the foot. And that's what the data tells us.
Within that same chart, it also lists others who people either have reported to or want to report to. And immediately below my immediate manager comes the HR rep, my manager's managers. And it's not until the fourth choice with 14% is the E&C representative. And then next is the compliance reporting helpline. And if we even combine those two, it's only 25%. And I have to admit, Erica, this gave me some pause when I saw this. Does this mean we, the collective compliance community, need to do a better job of making ourselves available? Or are the other channels, in your opinion, sufficient? And compliance could be a supplemental reporting channel as shown in this report.
Yeah. Tom, I mean, look, I'm never going to tell the ethics and compliance community not to make themselves more as accessible as they can be, because I do think that matters because you become a backstop. But I have to go back to the first, second, and third line of defense model when I answer this question, which is if you think about the day-to-day employee experience, you want a well-prepared first line of defense. That's what we're all looking for, is managers who are supporting their teams in the moment, making the right decisions, addressing issues, getting in front of problems and resolving them collectively with the assistance from the control functions that they need to reach out to. So putting the time in to make sure that those natural channels to whom I am most inclined to raise a concern are ready for those issues, That is time incredibly well spent. And if you have to decide as an ethics and compliance team between, making your way into the leadership development training that HR is doing for managers so that managers are prepared to be the leaders you need them to be, and doing a roadshow so that everybody knows who you are, I'd spend time on the managers first because your impact is going to be bigger.
Erica, the next real series of information or data points that struck me, I really wanted to explore with you. You have a great section on the speak up gap, and you look at it in various ways, gender, etc. But the one that spoke to me, or at least I wanted to visit with you about in some depth, is the gap by tenure,
Mhm.
meaning number of years that a company, an employee had been in a company. And
Yep.
this seemed to me to be almost counterintuitive. Nevertheless, that's what the data showed. So I was wondering if we might be able to explore the perception of whether people are willing to speak up by their length of time with the company.
Yep. Yeah. And we end up often calling this, Tom, and this is the phrase we use in the report, we call it the tenure smile. So the people who are new to the organization are generally very engaged, very aware of the resources that are available to them, feel very good about using those resources. And then the people on the other end, right, who have been with you for a long time, have been through some stuff with the company, feel in a similar sort of way. The middle of your curve, which is that sort of 3 to 5 to 7 to 8 year folks, those are the people who are going to be feeling a little bit differently about speaking up in particular. If we look at the data on speak up in particular, you've got that 5 to 8 year group being the least willing to report misconduct, the least comfortable with that process. And if you think about somebody's journey with a business, that makes a certain amount of sense. What happens when I'm about 5 years in? Am I getting to a sort of more senior level? Am I looking at my route within the organization? Am I thinking about my next promotion? Have I gotten myself to a place where I've built some relationships across the business? Maybe I don't want to burn any of those bridges. Tom, hypothetically speaking, how long have you and I known each other? 8, 9, 10 years, right? We were working together and I had a little bit of a concern about something you had done, but we had a really long working relationship. I might say, you know what? I'm not going to say anything about what I saw going on with Tom. I'm sure it's fine. And I'm just misunderstanding the circumstances. And so those are the kinds of things that we end up seeing employees find themselves in the middle of as they sort of turn the corner on that tenure piece. And this is actually consistent. I saw some analysis a couple of years ago from a couple of the hotline providers. And if you look at the people who are committing kind of tier one misconduct, they're often people who have been with an organization for about 7 or 8 years and have been recently passed up for promotion.
So if we take maybe a step back, Erica, and look at some of these bigger pictures that you've highlighted. Now I've asked you to take a little bit deeper dive into some. Is there an opportunity for growth? Is there an
Mhm.
opportunity for improvement? If so, how do we as a compliance profession move forward to try to ameliorate some of the concerns that are noted in the report?
Yeah. So I think a couple of things, Tom, that would be my main takeaways if I were sitting in an in-house seat and kind of wondering what to do with these insights. The first would be I would interrogate my own data in my case management system, and I would look for pockets of silence. Do I have far fewer reports coming in via manager than I think should be there based upon my peer data sets? Do I have How's my relationship with HR? Do I have a sense of what's in HR's data sets? Have I been able to consolidate our reporting so that I'm looking at what's coming in from an ER perspective or an HR perspective with the data that's coming in via hotline and proxy reporting from managers and that sort of thing? Even more simply, how's my proxy reporting process? Have I made it as easy as possible for managers to ask for help? Or is it the kind of thing where a manager might get a question from an employee and say, I don't really know what to do with that. And so they do nothing. That's always the danger is you have a manager that freezes and doesn't really know what to do with an employee issue. And so the employee feels good because they've given it to the manager who's going to take care of it. And then 5, 6, 7, 8 weeks go by and the employee thinks the company clearly doesn't care because nothing ever happened. And they're dissatisfied with the reporting process and they tell all their friends, like, don't bother to go talk to Tom because they're not going to do anything about it anyway. So really asking yourself, Have I communicated to my managers why they're going to wind up being channels for employees, whether they like it or not? Have I really effectively communicated what to do when somebody comes to them with a question? Have I made that what to do process as easy as possible? Have I made it super simple for somebody to reach out to me? Do they know who to go to? Do they know how to do it? And then do they know what to do next? So really kind of thinking through all of those stages in the process of somebody going to a manager. That would be the place I would start for sure. And then look at the data in the case management system. Ask if your reporting patterns are kind of on par with what's seen in larger data sets. If there are areas of silence, ask yourself why you might not be hearing from a particular part of the business. And then big thing for me, Tom, is we all have to stop over-indexing on what comes in through the hotline. Because what our data has been telling us for a decade is that there's lots of things happening in the business that are not coming in through the hotline.
So let me go back to some of the strategies you talked about if there's a lack of data.
Yeah.
And could it be that perhaps at the regional level or at the business unit level, there's actually sort of a, I would say, senior manager or top level blockage that's really not communicating? And is that something that companies can look at and perhaps move to remedy rather than simply looking at frontline managers and assuming the problems with them?
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. And for that piece, Tom, I would strongly recommend a practice that we like to call data layering. So that is looking at all of the available data pieces that you have to give you a sense of what I call the environment of compliance in a particular part of the business. And maybe you've got a good relationship with audit and you can look at remediation issues and how long it's been taking to remediate things. Maybe you've got a good relationship with HR. You can look at turnover or employee concerns or sick day patterns or things like that. You can, if you've got a relationship, you're a company with a good safety culture, you can look at safety data. You're a quality culture, you can look at quality data. All of those pieces together will give you a picture from a distance of the extent to which that particular business unit lead is committed to doing business the way that the consolidated control functions at the company need them to be doing business. And if you've got a, because the chances are good that if you've got a manager who is maybe sort of controlling their part of the business and not letting any information escape because they don't want anybody to know what's happening there, that tendency is showing up in more places than just the E&C data. And so if you have those good cross-functional control relationship, you can start to share data and get a sense of whether you've got an issue that is perhaps a little broader than just one data set would indicate.
Erica, I know you've been talking about this report, obviously on this podcast and others. How do you, Ethisphere, anticipate utilizing this information going forward?
So we've got a few things, Tom, that we're working on. Obviously, we'll continue to talk about the insights because we think that there's a lot of interesting benchmarking work that can be done utilizing the culture data specifically itself. But we're also doing a lot of work looking at how do we better support ethics and compliance teams in supporting managers. So whether that is some of the work we've done building toolkits or communication vehicles or other things that will help managers be better leaders at whatever level they might be. So whether that is a frontline leader or that's somebody in the middle of the pack within a particular business unit, or it's somebody who is actually running a region or business unit for an organization. Really looking across that portfolio of managerial expertise and asking what those managers need and how we can better support E&C teams in getting those tools out. So we've done a lot of work over the course of the last couple of years in building toolkits, in building short communication vehicles, cartoons, things like that, that ethics and compliance teams can deploy to their managers. And then look, culture is something we care a lot about. The DOJ has made it clear they care a lot about it. So we're going to continue to talk about this data and this work and how to do it better and better for as long as there's this work to be done, whether that is in the context of the webcasts we do, the master classes we do, these reports that we come out with, some of the other thought leadership that we're doing. We've got a whole culture edition of Ethisphere magazine that will be coming in the fall. This really is the heart of, to us, this is the heart of building a business that runs on integrity. And that's what we're committed to do.
Could you say a few words about the masterclass that Ethisphere is putting on based upon this report?
Yeah, it was a 3-part series, Tom, and it's all available now on demand. And so we broke And anybody who's interested in watching those on-demand pieces can go to ethisphere.com/events and register to get all 3 pieces of the masterclass. And so we broke it down into the 3 phases of culture measurement. We talked about the things we have learned about how to measure well, right? What goes into launching a survey, what goes into making sure that you get a response rate. How do you deal with accusations of over surveying, which Tom, I had the chance to talk to Hema on Great Women in Compliance last week, and she and I talked about the fact that I would like us to all stop using over surveying as an excuse, because we're not over surveying, we're under actioning. If I feel like you are going to actually do something with my feedback, I will give you my feedback every day and twice on Sundays. I will be happy to respond to your surveys. Where we see companies running into trouble with employee response rates is when they don't feel like it matters. And so if you keep asking employees for their opinion and then they never see anything change, they're going to stop responding to your survey. So to me, it's not over surveying, it's under actioning. And then the second piece of the webinar was, okay, you finished the survey. How do you think about communicating the results? Who do they go to? How do you use them? What do you tell the board? What do you tell leadership? What do you tell employees? And then the last piece was action planning off the results itself. So what does it look like to actually build a multi-month, multi-quarter plan to effectuate change?
Erica, unfortunately, we are near the end of our time for this episode. We're going to link to all of these resources in our show notes. I wanted to thank you for, 1, your perseverance getting to this podcast, but 2, this report is great. It's great information. And what really struck me, Erica, was the amount of actionable information in this report.
Tom, I will thank you for that, because I will tell you that is such a focus of the team here at Ethisphere. We are really trying to put pragmatic tools and actionable advice in the hands of our community. And so that is the focus of every one of these reports that we do. So sounds like we hit the mark on this one, and I'll be sure to let the team know.
Great. Thank you. And I can't wait to see what you guys come up with next.
All right. Thanks for having me back, Tom. Looking forward to talking again soon.